Hundreds of foreign passport holders and some seriously injured Palestinians left Gaza today through the Rafah crossing into Egypt. This comes following an agreement between Egypt, Hamas, and Israel that up to 500 people may cross daily. Among those who left were 22 international staff from Doctors Without Borders, also known as MSF. Once again, we've reached the Executive Director of Doctors Without Borders Canada to learn more about this. Joseph Belliveau, thank you for joining us yet again today.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me again.
So your colleagues, your staff, they've been unable to leave Gaza since October 7th. What can you tell us about the decision to leave today when the opportunity presented itself?
Well, we've had exactly 22 colleagues down by the southern border near Rafah for really the last couple of weeks. And so it's a great relief that they've been able to evacuate. Along with many injured people in a large convoy, so that's certainly a relief for us. However, the flow of aid the other direction is still woefully inadequate compared to what the needs are in terms of medical supplies, in terms of water, food, fuel, and so on. And certainly the conditions for continuing to operate with any level of security and safety inside Gaza, particularly northern Gaza, are very, very far from met.
So now that these 22 have chosen to leave, can people go in to replace them, or is this an unreplaceable drop in sort of the medical capacity inside Gaza?
MSF, Doctors Without Borders, we still have about 300 or so colleagues, most of them still exhausted, in fear about when the next bombs are going to drop, but still providing what assistance they can. We're organizing vehicles and medical teams on the other side of Gaza here, just ready to get in once the border is allows us to get those goods and people in, but also once the safety conditions are there and can be met. We just had just 2 days ago. There was another bombing of a hospital, the Turkish Friendship Hospital in northern Gaza. The third floor of that hospital was hit and quite badly damaged. That event, combined with other attacks on that particular facility, combined with running out of fuel for the generator, has caused all activities to cease in that hospital. So this was a hospital for cancer patients, really the main or only main hospital in Gaza for cancer treatment. We did mental health care there as well. So the discontinuing of those treatments certainly will have fatal consequences for the cancer patients. And just more generally, I mean, the conditions that the rest of my MSF Doctors Without Borders colleagues continue to operate in is just. I mean, one of my colleagues was describing just recently how they were using a whiteboard, and on this whiteboard they would put the weekly and daily tallies for surgeries that were needed in the hospital. They've simply wiped that clean because the volume of need is so high, and replaced what was on that board with these words: "We did what we could. Remember us." And it speaks to what so many of my other colleagues are saying. Another colleague was just describing how he had split his family into put them in different parts of Gaza, hoping that would increase the chances of not all of them being killed, of at least some of them surviving. So, the desperation that we're hearing from our doctors and nurses, and then the conditions that they're working under, it's just getting harder and harder to imagine.
I want to talk more about a hospital in just a second, but I also want to talk on what's happened in the Jabalia refugee camp, because the Israeli Defense Force admitted today to a second blast at that camp. Yesterday's killed around 50 people. They said they were targeting Ibrahim Biari, one of the masterminds of the October 7th attack. Do you still have anyone tending to people there, and have you been able to learn what the scene looks like at the refugee camp as a result of these last two blasts?
What I can attest to is the patient flow into Al-Shifa Hospital, where my colleagues were working, and they just described a huge number of casualties coming into the hospital just over the last hours. Most of them, quote, women and children. And my surgeon colleague described how many of them were young children with very severe life-threatening wounds and burn injuries. And a number of these young children also arrived without any other family members, no parents, no other family members, and just screaming in pain and also just in terror. And whatever might be happening in terms of the bombing in order to target combatants in this conflict, the result is that non-combatants continue to be almost incessantly hit and in the indiscriminate bombing, and the casualties are mounting. Hundreds of casualties, according to my colleagues, still coming into the hospitals that are now barely functioning on a daily basis.
Well, you mentioned Al Shifa Hospital, and that's the largest hospital in Gaza. It's in the area that the IDF has said should be evacuated. And when we last spoke, it was that very day that the Israel intelligence services released their analysis of Al Shifa, saying that they had pretty clear proof that it was being used by Hamas as an operations center. And you expressed concern that maybe that is a preemptive justification that this could become a military target. Well, I spoke with Jonathan Conricus, the Lieutenant Colonel, the spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces yesterday about this. And I mentioned that we are hearing that there are people who cannot evacuate the hospital. There are babies there in incubators. There are people there too sick to go. There are people there who are on ventilators and simply can't move. Here's what he said about that.
And in 2 weeks, I think you can move a person who has just undergone heart surgery, and you can move people in incubators. Yes, it's inconvenient. Yes, it is dangerous. It is a war zone. But if you want to, and if your real priority is to save life, then you can do it definitely in 2 weeks, and you can travel 7 or 10 kilometers, 5 miles in 2 weeks. I think that is definitely achievable.
So you can see there, he's saying if it's truly Hamas's priority, Al Shifa could have been evacuated and everyone could have been moved safely to the south. Does that align with your understanding of the medical situation inside Gaza?
Look, every hospital in the northern part of Gaza has been given orders to evacuate. Every hospital throughout Gaza, north and south, is completely overwhelmed with medical cases. Our teams estimate about 20,000 people across Gaza are injured and in need of medical assistance. And these hospitals are absolutely overwhelmed with need. Now, on top of that, you say, well, you've given time to evacuate, and it is not possible. It is simply not possible to evacuate without putting people's lives at risk. You mentioned the young newborns in incubators, severely wounded patients, severely ill patients, cancer patients, and so on. You cannot move, and we're talking thousands of people with nowhere to go. Their lives are at risk if you move them. It's not a reasonable request under these circumstances. Now, I certainly cannot speak to military targets and where there might be a military target or not. What I can speak to is definitely where there are civilians, where there are non-combatants, and there are huge numbers of non-combatants in these hospitals, including in Al Shifa right now.
So what do you think happens next? I mean, where does this go? If we have the IDF saying, there's been enough time and people could have done it, and the doctors are still completely overwhelmed with no ability to make it happen, in your view?
Well, to say that I'm concerned and to say that my colleagues are concerned is a drastic understatement. MSF has stepped out, as you know, over the last few days and actually called for a ceasefire, and it's something that MSF very rarely does, because what we would normally do is we would say, look to the warring parties, please respect non-combatants, please respect the Geneva Conventions, please conduct your warfare in a manner consistent that offers a measure of protection to civilians. What we've seen is, consistently throughout this, is that the combination of incessant and indiscriminate bombing combined with the siege, and siege warfare is also a form of indiscriminate warfare, because you're not just putting a siege that is going to affect your combatant opponents. That siege affects every civilian as well. And this combination is just having, you get out at a loss for words. It's It's just an overwhelming, catastrophic situation. So we're stepping out and we're calling for that ceasefire simply because we see that that's the only way to give meaning to the warfare and the consequences of the warfare in this particular consequence. So you asked, okay, what can we look forward to next? Certainly, MSF and many others are mobilizing the potential for a massive humanitarian response that if and when the conditions are safe enough for us to go in, if and when we're able to get a flow of goods and medical supplies in there, we anticipate we're going to be responding just on a pure medical basis for many, many months to come. So first things first, ceasefire, stop the bombing.
Joseph Belliveau, Executive Director of Doctors Without Borders Canada. Thanks for joining us yet again tonight. Thanks.
Thanks so much, David.